Thanks, everyone. Always intimidating to hear yourself on the microphone. I'd like to start by thanking Murrindindi for our beautiful welcome to country this morning, and I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we're gathered today, Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations people with us today. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. We just corrected a spelling mistake on our title, so you'll have to humbly forgive us if you find more throughout the presentation. We work in schools, so of course this was last minute. I might try and make that a bit taller for you, Stewie. Right. So welcome. Saints College, we've just recently had a rebrand. You might remember us as St Joseph's Schools. We've been in Victoria since 2012. And we've just moved across to Saints College. So as Viv introduced us, we are the managers of practice and community at Saints College. Now, I want to preface by saying that Saints College is a really highly adjusted setting, and we acknowledge the struggle that most mainstream schools are having at the moment in the current climate. It's a really difficult space to navigate. So we are talking from our experience, but Saints College is a really adjusted specialist setting, which includes, I guess, all of our classes have a teacher and a youth worker, and we are highly staffed. So some of the strategies we'll be talking about today, we're really open to discussing how that might fit in with more of a mainstream context. But to give a brief introduction, Saints College is a space that incorporates radical inclusion. So that means that the young people that we work with, the spectrum of that is incredibly diverse. So we have large cohorts of young people who are neurodivergent. We have lots of young people who have experienced chronic school disengagement. And of course, we have lots of young people who have been excluded from school either through continual patterns of suspension or through expulsion, which is often through violent incidents at previous schools. We do so, I guess, acknowledging this through a lens of real cultural sensitivity and with a sense of agency.
Our frameworks of practice are what separates us apart from a mainstream school. We also work on the understanding that inherently young people want to be at school, that young people want to be included and do not want to display violence or become dysregulated. They yearn for inclusion, acceptance and community. We see this and we foster these connections. So our frameworks of practice are underpinned by operation by principles. Common ground. So common ground is meeting young people where they are at and walking beside them on their journey. It is cooperation through negotiation and not through intimidation. Unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard, or UPI, is we recognise and understand that traumatised young people exhibit traumatising behaviours and that a young person is not simply that behaviour. They are inherently human beings worthy of our care, our support and their education. We use collaborative problem-solving practices and trauma-informed practice that Emma will talk about more. Now, our operation by principles, we hold 4 principles: honesty, participation, respect, and safe and legal. Today, we'll talk a lot about safe and legal. Those 4 principles, they make up our working agreements and they guide our learning environment.
So Viv's already introduced us, but a bit about us. Foremost, Stewie and I are both youth workers. It's our favourite part of the job, engaging with young people, still to this day. You can imagine public speaking is less so, but we're getting used to it. We both started off in youth residential care, myself at Hurstbridge Farm and Stewie in many sites across the Barwon area, and then we both moved into flexible learning. So we've both had over 10 years experience in the flexible learning environment, and I had a really amazing opportunity in 2023 to hop across to Wyndham and work for department, and really can appreciate the other side of the fence now about some of the challenges that those school sites experience and the hard work that those that the staff are doing out there to maintain safety for the young people. Okay, so when we were looking at, I guess, how we would break this down, what do we do day to day? How do we support our young people? We thought it'd be easy to just break it into 3 sections. So getting to know the young person, how do we individualise? How do we gather and share information whilst maintaining the dignity of our young people and always in support of helping to make sure that they are skill building towards safety? And lastly, how do we as staff promote a culture of child safety? So history can be a strong predictor of future. Seeking out information to first assess risk and then planning structured proactive support for young people to reduce the risk of incidents in the future. We suggest that the best way to prevent violence in schools is to understand the individual's risk of violence and to support that young person to build safety and self-regulation for safer choices in their future. So how do we do this?
When getting to know young people, we utilise our practice and philosophies. Common ground, unconditional positive regard, and collaborative problem solving or collaborative proactive solutions. We don't ever assume that a young person has already learned a behaviour. We are always curious and we challenge the problem. We always offer support for young people to learn through choice and through creating their own strategies.
So everything starts at enrolment for us. We do lots of talking about the future talking. So that it can include things like discussing behavioural support plans and what safety can look like for that young person from the moment that we meet them. What's been successful in the past? How have they operated in different spaces where this behaviour hasn't been present?
We discuss and negotiate challenges always regarding low level behaviour. We don't ever walk past a behaviour because the behaviour that we ignore is the behaviour that we accept. And we do this through working agreements, process praise, and using overt conversations about safety. And I'll say it again, we don't ever assume a young person has learned a behaviour. I think Trent spoke about it earlier and he talked about going outside if you can't tie your shoelaces. So we don't ever assume a young person has learned a behaviour.
There's a lot of investment in making sure that all of our staff are upskilled. So we invest in every single member of our community, similar to the sanctuary model. We put all of our staff through trauma-informed practice training, and we provide them with really direct training on soft skills as well. So some of that stuff has been spoken about today around Dan and Hugh's model of PACE, but also looking at collaborative problem-solving models, so how to have those conversations with young people to promote their sense of agency and choice. And lastly, we're always front-loading our expectations. So as Stewie said, we're never assuming a young person understands what we have as our expectations for behaviour. We negotiate, and we do that through our structures such as working agreements. So I want to be really clear, we do lots of information gathering and sharing, and that's always from a place of support and never from a place of justifying exclusion. We're always doing so to maintain the dignity and support the understanding of the young person alongside the young person and with all of their available resources. This helps us to be ahead of the behaviour. When we spend time investing in understanding the young person, we can really take into account what's happening for them and work with them in a way that's proactive before we arrive at an incident. So that all those front-loading conversations that help support the young person mean that it's easier to have a conversation if we do arrive at a space where there is an incident of violence. We do so by training all of our staff in using systems that are applicable for this. So all of our staff have child safety training, all of our staff understand FIS and FITSIS, and we, through department, I got really intimate in understanding what data collection tools they have available to them, of which I would recommend Staying in Education dashboard tool, which is a risk assessment tool that often people don't even know about, and can really be helpful in supporting us to understand the risk of young people as they've moved through their schooling. We use student support group meetings for every young person every term, and that helps us to really individualise the learning outcomes for our young people. I guess what's important for us to remember is, though we provide a really large degree of support for our young people, at the end of the day, we're a school. And so within our role and our context, we have to make sure that we're supporting the young person to engage safely back to their education. And from a department perspective, it's really important to acknowledge patterns of disengagement. I think one of the strongest correlations that we were seeing between young people who are experiencing exclusion in schools, in mainstream schools, was strong patterns of consistent disengagement and then returning to school and having incidents.
We ensure we have clear in-school processes and staff know their role and young people know the staff's role. They know what support can be offered by who and what are our expectations for safe engagement at school. Being clear and focused helps us to address the barriers that support engagement in education.
I'm again going to talk about the talking. When we are having meetings with our young people, that should never be the first time that they learn to understand our processes. In them enrolling with us, we're always really clear about what happens when something doesn't go to plan. And that way, when we arrive at that inevitable moment for every one of us, they are familiar with the processes. So that's really important for us.
We ensure we are clear around reporting responsibilities and child safety, empowering young people and families with information and the opportunity for feedback. We have clear induction processes. We unpack the school systems with the young person. What do we mean by values-based language and the principles? We unpack collaborative problem solving and safety and support planning, and we explain the why and how it can benefit the young person's access to information. And we monitor and we update priority lists and risk registers, and we're proactive about check-ins and don't let problems arise.
Again, I want to be really clear. We understand that we're incredibly well staffed to do this, but hopefully providing some strategies to a toolkit for anyone can be better than none at all. So one thing that I think our organisation does exceptionally well is promote a really strong culture of child safety. So all of our staff are inducted through trauma-informed practice, and that helps shape the way that every communication moment with young people occurs. As suggested earlier, we make sure that every staff member, including all of our admin and maintenance staff, have child safety training. And we're looking at how we explore the MARAM frameworks and all of our additional stakeholder resources through Lookout as well. This helps to support conversations through with our young people. And I think that it's a really important thing to feel as you move around our spaces that this is a child-safe space and that our young people can safely engage in conversations with all adults that we have working with us.
What proactive support do we offer? Common ground and collaborative problem solving. Again, not ever assuming a young person has learned a behaviour. Upskilling conversations during exclusion, suspension or BSM or disengagement. Through our processes, we are always trying to minimise a shame response for the young person. And we front load expectations through negotiation and collaboration. So we run the CPS model, and we always have operation by principle and collaborative problem solving conversations with young people when they are regulated and when they are ready to learn. And we refer back to these discussions frequently and at every opportunity.
Our induction process is incredibly tailored and it supports the young person reading through the young person commitment. So our 4 principles is a democratic framework. So we expect the young person to be able to understand the principles and be able to negotiate through them with staff in common ground. And for that to happen effectively, they have to be really well inducted into that process. So we'll spend a lot of time, I guess, getting information from the young person and their families, but also sitting down with their families and them and making sure that they understand what our frameworks look like and that they can connect with the 4 principles as well to help support conversations in the future. Obviously, we have a really strong emphasis on safety and support planning. We use the young person's self-reflection and we use our own observations as practitioners to develop accessible support strategies for young people whilst they're at school. These are supported by frameworks like Berry Street and helping the young person to understand the impact of stress on their body. So we would then tailor them down further. So we either have support strategies on cards for their key staff, or we'd be doing things like doing temperature checks and check-ins with them ahead of time to remind them of their support strategies before they arrive at the day.
Using the 4 principles, we develop working agreements, and this is where we negotiate the classroom environment with the young people. Working agreements require clear, non-confrontational conversations, negotiating what safety across all activities, including the classroom, and look like, and identifying what supports a young person or the group need to be safe from moment to moment. These conversations must be courageous and they must address safety and they must be non-confrontational at all times.
A strategy that we can use as a highly adjusted setting is temperature checks. So with youth workers in the classroom, when we know that a young person may have a complex environment that they are arriving to school from, we will check in on them and just assess what their needs might be before they arrive at school to ensure that we can support them for that day, or whether they need additional support before they arrive at school. So this is a common practice, and particularly it helps when we've observed a young person have a challenging day to help support them by offering this. Helps to build trusting relationships with safe adults as well.
Furthermore, all young people will receive a wellbeing check-in at the start and the end of every day, and we call that circle time. So we do a group check-in to identify needs and determine what supports are required, and we maintain the regulation of the group. We determine and minimise any factors that could impact the dynamic of the group.
A strong tool that we've used in managing supports and helping to develop really meaningful and intentional safety planning is escalation mapping. So from my experience working in department, we would often meet in BSIMs, in behavioural support intervention meetings, and the young person would have to explain what had happened and what changes they would make in the future without a large degree of self-awareness. So escalation mapping is a tool that I used really successfully both there and commonly in our practice at Saints College. That is supporting the young person to understand the fullness of the day, what has happened before they've arrived at an incident where maybe they've made unsafe choices, and to help them understand what different choices they could make before they arrive at a space where they become dysregulated. So tailoring safety and support planning to make sure that it's really individualised to help understand the young person understand what's happening for them before these particular moments, and then skill build and structure supports so that we as a safe adults can make sure that they can make different choices in the future.
We offer intensive outreach programs. So if a young person continues to be dysregulated by the school environment, we support conversations in an environment where they feel safe and are regulated. We also ensure that young people who aren't on site have ongoing access to education and wellbeing support.
And lastly, obviously, when we are working with young people who have significant histories of trauma, that often means that they can have significant conflict with peers. And both Stewie and I have a long history of working with young people engaged in the youth justice system, meaning that conflict with peers can be of significant risk. So a tool that we use in these times when we do have young people enrolled who have high risk peer conflict is timetabling. And this is not to make sure that we exclude a young person. It is to ensure that we timetable them away from that conflict so that they can experience safety and engagement and learning whilst they're enrolled with us. From my previous program, when I was working on site at North Melbourne, we had at one time, I think 40 enrolments, of which I think about 32 were currently involved in the youth justice system. So we would really structure and timetable our young person's engagement. But what that meant was we were having frequent conversations with the young people around safety, around how they were managing their safety, what current conflict they had in community, and all of those were helping to help them to understand how they could manage their self-regulation better. As I said earlier, we are foremost a school, so we have to ensure the safety of our young people, the other young people that are around them, and try and minimise any points of contact that might pose as a risk for young person having conflict on site. So our structured timetabling was always to make sure that we could help our young people to feel safe whilst they were engaging in site, and safe and ready to learn, which is our primary objective.
In closing, what we've learned over our years of experience is that young people don't need perfect adults. I'm a prime example of that. But what they need is a safe person who's committed to their well-being. Safe relationships are your first step to supporting traumatised young people to begin their journey of self-realisation and agency. We encourage you to walk beside young people on their journey, because at times the road is dark and scary, and it will be much easier to travel it if they can hold the hand of someone safe, just like you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.